Welcome back, everyone. This is Shadow Drake. So now we're going to continue with Vulcan Brutal. I hope the mic quality has been okay. I'm trying to make something work, but anyways. So what we got through with last time is I actually got the face change set up completely done. And now typically if you're in the Discord or you look at the Discord, somebody asks for a cooling solution for Vulcan, typically I always say something like an open loop cooler that cools down a thermal battery, which then is used to be a central heat dump for getting something else to room temperature. And so the setup that you see here is typically what I'm referring to. Now, it's not fully automated yet. It's also not the big scale system I typically make, but it is essentially the skeleton or, the base structure for the system that I tend to make when I go full scale. And so now that I've gotten that done, somewhere around the last video I decided that I need to make the Stirlings. I decided that powering everything off of coal, it's doable. But at daytime I don't burn through a lot of power, just because by the very nature of the only thing that's running is that the condenser evaporation pair. That's only 100 watts idle, plus any IC10s or anything else that's running, that that's whatever the idle that is, which isn't much. However, at night when the whole system is running, I'm burning through a lot more power because volume pumps are on, power vents are on, and you see that battery is at yellow? And that's a pretty big change. Anyway, so I decided that the next thing I need to do, because I'm trying to get I'm waiting for the CO2 to get cool, might as well make the Stirlings so that I can have, quote, renewable energy source from something that gives me a big chunk of power for the material and the time investment. Now, I know I've already explained myself about why I'm not doing solar, about how it's just a lot of material or a lot of time, a lot of stuff to get down. But the only reason that the Stirlings is in my opinion a viable option right now is because I took the time to tech up my printers. My printers are tech 2, except for the autolathe, but that allows me to use large power vents. That allows me to use IC10. Well, I mean, you had IC10 at tier 1, but it allows me to more easily set up my IC10 to get batteries up. If I actually had a large station battery at this point, I could technically have done that too, so that I could have bulk power storage. And as before, I am skipping all the stuff that I stay inside. So this is where I'm actually really seeing how the hard suit is really impacting my ability to do work outside, because I'm constantly keeping an eye on that. Yeah. So anyways, the big thing about the Stirlings is, they can generate up to 8 kilowatts of power. Solar panels can only do 500 watts of power per solar panel, whereas Stirlings, I can get up to 8 kilowatts when it's properly configured, and it kind of reaches the same problem. Solar panels should be a good source of power at the daytime for Vulcan normally, and then at night, ideally you swap over to Stirling power, which should make up, you should get a very decent run of power throughout the entire day and night cycle. And so ideally you want a mixture of both. So, I could have probably had set up tracking panels, maybe for just 2 solar panels, just some idle power generation. That honestly would not have been a bad idea. And then had the Stirlings to really make up the deficit, because nighttime power consumption is actually pretty big. Looking back on that, that's probably the one thing I should have changed. The Auto tracking for solar panels is really not that hard to get done. I've done tutorials for the chips, could have done chips. The IC10 would have simplified the setup. Really, I really could have done more. I mean, I could have even put a wind turbine, just an upright wind turbine. Anyways, so the main thing for nighttime power generation with the Stirlings is you need to collect a lot of hot gases during the daytime. You need to get probably a small insulated tank for just simplicity's sake, almost fully filled up, pipe groaning pressures, 50 megapascals. And then run that through the Stirlings. Yeah, you can tell I cool down that CO2 to 25 Celsius. I think later I actually end up fixing that script because it wasn't performing how I expected it to. Anyways, so you can get a decent chunk of power out of your Stirlings. I completely lost my train of thought when I got distracted. The 8 kilowatts is quite a huge sum of power. You got to fill up a insulated tank up with daytime gases. Ideally, over 500 Celsius would be a pretty good start. You kind of have to script it a little bit better so that you don't overpressurize and explode that tank. Well, it won't explode, it'll burst. More than likely, it'll set a lot of things on fire around it. Then wait till nighttime and let those hot gases very, very slowly escape through the Stirling while generating power. And depending on how filled that volatiles canisters are, yeah, you can potentially make close to your 8 kilowatts of power just off of daytime gas. Well, I have done a video on how to properly set up a Stirling. One of the things, though, is what you have to consider for Stirling and Vulcan is in wintertime, the temperatures creep up to 1100 Celsius, which is actually pretty hot. And so that in turn will allow the Stirlings to generate much more power, but you also put yourself in a bigger danger of making them explode. So it's actually a very careful balance. And, I kind of fill the Stirlings to what would be safe and give myself leeway room. But honestly, I can't really properly measure how well it's going to run until I empty out the insulated tank and fill it with close to 1000 Celsius gases and run that through the Stirling. So, yeah. So at this point, I am getting myself set up to be able to automate the whole Stirling power system. Now, one of the things that it requires is a gas sensor, so that I know when's the optimal times for me to capture gases and turn on the Stirlings. And I put that large power vent in the front, basically in the front of my base. And I want to make sure that that gas sensor still sees some of the daytime gases when it runs, when that power vent runs. Otherwise, I'm going to get some weird funkiness happening where it's going to read daytime temps, and then it's going to read nil. And then, back and forth. So I decided that, that should be pretty far away, because large power vents actually do quite a bit of work. I know that's going to bug people, the fact that I put that off-center, but I mean... Look, when I was just placing stuff, I didn't really think about how it would look like. I just placed things. So, yeah, I could have moved that sensor. And see, I realized that issue right there, too, so, whatever. So yeah, renewable power from Stirlings. That's what I opted for. One thing that did confuse me is that the large power vents require pipes for just the power vent version, but the large requires electronic parts. I'm kind of wondering what happened to those pipes. Like, how do I suddenly not need any more piping? That's always confused me about the power vents. You'd think it'd be more pipes required, but apparently not. So it is day 10, going into day 11. I am still pretty much woefully behind. I have that one solar panel that at this point is just kind of there. It's just a decoration for just some minor power generation. I still need to get the greenhouse set up, and I decided to go big or go home on that greenhouse because I just didn't want to put too much stuff in different places, which I think is probably what slowed a lot of things down. But I mean, if you look at this right now, the Stirlings are actually pretty well set up. There you go. The whole system is ready. I do like that they changed the IC to have one single port. Does save a little bit on cabling. So all I'm gonna need for this one is the gas sensor, the tank, and of course I put the power vent because I only intended to have the one. Personally, the best thing to do would have been to, if I was going to have multiple power vents, to just use batch instruction. But a large power vent can actually get quite a significant sum of gas. This is around the time that I discovered that filtration is not doing what I expected it to do, because I noted down that I had about 5 kilomoles of CO2, and I just checked that. Theoretically, if I had done my logic right for that CO2 filter, I should have had a little bit more, because the tank was below temperature. So, time to fix it. And this is the reason why I didn't post the other CO2 filtration, because I had an error in it and I wanted to fix it. And also slowly becoming more and more stinky. I think I've seen the hygiene meter hit red 2 times, maybe 3 times so far. And I started getting a good sense of how long it took for that to happen. So yeah, here I come back to try to figure out what happened. The biggest problem was the select instruction stuff, so I had to try to figure out what was wrong, what messed up. Then the last part, I told you that I mixed up on the select instructions. I put R6 first, and then 1, and R6, and then 0. Well, the problem is, I kind of had to reason through the whole logic. And eventually fix it. But then I decided, well, not entirely sure what I had to do. So I decided, might as well move on to something I did know. So, alias the sensor, alias the tank, alias the large vent. Go figure. Just needed to take a break from that type of logic. Sometimes the logic for that is kind of, you just draw a blank as to where you could have gone wrong. If you've seen most of my coding, this, I always get the structure first. I highly recommend that if you're doing the coding for IC10 or something, get the structure first, because at least then you can eliminate issues where you have an incorrect structure. It really does help. So once again, for the Stirlings, I wanted a trigger. So at 150 Celsius, I want the Stirlings to turn on. Now, as far as the tank is concerned, I want to naturally draw in air that is over 500 Celsius into the tank. But I also want to limit it so that I don't overpressurize past, in this case, 50 megapascals. I did also decide that because winter time, it's going to be hot, therefore the tank air is going to be a little bit warmer. I did want to only draw in air that was warmer than what is currently in the tank. So that way I preserve the power generation. But coming out from winter to summertime in Vulcan, eventually my power is going to diminish because I'm not replenishing it. So I did decide to also put a pressure minimum so that if I am below pressure, I'm just going to pressurize it once the temperature hits 500 C. Once it gets above a specific minimum, then I am going to swap over to at least greater temperatures than what is in the tank. So the easiest thing to set up first was the turn on for this, the turn on settings for the Stirling. Now I did comment out that instruction for turning on the Stirlings because I needed to absolutely make sure that when I filled the canister and I was guessing about 80 moles, I wanted to make sure that I did not do something, it wasn't going to blow up. I did put a little bit of safety here so that try to make sure that the Stirlings did not turn on if they were over 10 megapascals of pressure. That's really not, and the only reason I chose that is because that's about the maximum that I can put on into the canister. I'll eventually swap it to smart canisters, and then I can edge that up to about 10,500 or almost 11 megapascals. But I figure for the time being, cut it off at 10 megapascals. And if so, turn the Stirlings on. So now comes the whole temperature control for the large power vents. I'm sorry I left the mouse right there. So this is what I'm talking about, that temperature thing. If the tank, I will only turn it on if the temperature outside is greater than inside, right? But I decided that I will turn it on anyways if it's less than 20 megapascals. Then I am checking to make sure that if it is greater, I'll allow it to be turned on. So the conditions for the temperatures is the first case, and then the OR will be if it's less than 20 megapascals, I'll do that anyways too. But I didn't like the way I had that logic because then I'll just be turning on the vents at all times. So I needed to make another AND instruction to limit that. See, I had a plan. I just didn't quite orient it the way I should have. And I realized that I made the T min. And I never put that in there. And that's supposed to apply for the second case where, hey, I turned this on if less than 20 megapascals but greater than 500 Celsius. And that's what that and instruction is for. So that completes the code for the Stirling nighttime power generation. And you see that my hygiene went away. And it's basically going to immediately come back.
Oxygen critical.
Noted that the temperatures were 500 Celsius, which is perfect, which means it should run as soon as I turn that on. Now you actually have to be careful where you place the large power vents, because the thing about them is that the large power vents can actually hold you hostage against the wall, especially for a slightly more pressurized world like that is basically any pressurized world other than Mars. So I decided to turn it on when it was hot outside so that I can kind of gauge what the temperature will hit. Of course, it wasn't going to generate any power whatsoever because it doesn't generate power backwards. That is some cold CO2 is all I can say. So now comes time to fix the CO2 filtration. Eventually. Been more of a warrior checking on all sorts of stuff. I mean, this is, what, part 5? Yeah, this is part 5. Still running under a whole massive time crunch, and I am way behind on so many things. But now is the time for me to prepare myself for the greenhouse. So, like the greenhouse, I will put yet another station battery there, because I'm seeing that I don't seem to have materials, so I need to go get that. This has actually been the hardest part about the whole run. The fact that I need to go get more materials and keep smelting and doing stuff that really slow me down. And that's kind of why I didn't want to do the solar panels. It does add up after a while. But I kind of forced myself into this position. I do like that you can use the Vulcan atmosphere to basically smelt your ores. Oh, I haven't even talked about the fact of how much iron I'm gonna need. So one of the major things about the hydroponics trays is they take 10 iron each. I'm expecting to grow about 80 something plants, potatoes at a time, to generate oxygen, that means I need almost 1,000 grams of iron. Basically a kilogram of iron. It's a lot of iron. I'm beginning to build the stuff that I need for the greenhouse. I will need the iron grates to be what, holds the what holds the plants. I do need a ladder. It's saving frequently, so I believe this one is to be the emergency backup battery for the whole nighttime power system. Yeah, that's what that's for. I definitely want to keep that going. I don't want to let the Vulcan nighttime thing ever run out of power at an awkward or bad time. And here you see that the system, how I had it code, worked well. So I was getting 650 Celsius. It stopped. And I think for some reason I thought that it should have kept going because I put 30 megapascals. I checked that real quick. So, oh, it was 20. I really meant to do that at 30. And then I finally uncommented out the Stirlings, so that way it actually generated power at night. And with that, that system is completely set up. Stirlings will now generate power. So pretty much for a long time, that's actually going to solve my power crisis. I no longer will have a power crisis. And I just decided to let that keep cooling stuff down. So let's work on the greenhouse. So, like Mars, I don't know where I am on that series compared to this, but this is basically the intention for the greenhouse. I have basically a second floor, and I have those floor gratings lead up to the quote second floor. That's where all my plants are going to be at. So the top part is going to be made out of glass. The bottom part is just going to be made of walls. So now comes the point where I need to actually create walls. And I am realizing that that is going to be a significant investment of plastic. And I figured I'm going to need a powered vent now. Because it will depressurize the greenhouse much faster than the other stuff. And my floorage continues. I want two of them, obviously. I want the large power vent. Those things do a great job at depressurizing. Even on Venus, those things do a very good job at depressurizing. So as I'm looking back at this, I really do think the hard suit was kind of a mistake. Because I am still subconsciously not doing much stuff outside. I think what probably would have helped better is if I kept the EVA suit on me as well and swapped between the two. maybe swap to the EVA suit at nighttime, because I wasn't, you know, it's not going to generate a lot of power, a lot of heat. Alright, I think finally I realized that that's not working right. It should be working, but it's not. Probably that would have helped greatly, because now you see that I'm generating quite a big chunk of power. 3.6 kilowatts. Both of them. So, yeah, no power issues. But yeah, if I swap to the EVA suit at night, my hygiene wouldn't drain as fast. You know, it would have lasted at least twice as long. And if I swap to the hard suit, when I was going to be out during the day, that would have been better. It would have gained me a little bit of extra time. But also, the other thing I completely forgot as well is that the Icarus suit exists, and I don't know if there's actually a limitation for that. I don't own Icarus, I don't play Icarus, and yet I've actually been able to build it before. So I'm not entirely sure what is needed to not be locked out of using that. Alright, now that I am pushing CO2 into there to be cooled, I am able to keep building up the buffer. That, you know, everything is now set up for my cooling system to properly build CO2, both for heat buffer and also for filling the greenhouse. So now I completed two major steps that needed to be done anyways. One, a more renewable power source with the Stirlings, and two, an atmospherics collection and heat pump system. Now, basically focus completely on the greenhouse. I need to get the walls. I need to get it enclosed. I need to get it pressurized. I need to get CO2 in there. I need to get literally plants growing, literally potatoes growing. It's day 11 and I am behind. And like I said, that I did plan on using the Vulcan sun and take advantage of the enhanced growth from that to help, you know, to get there faster. So first things first, I might as well get the station battery connected. Let it start charging up. Since I have basically renewable power, it's going to eventually fill up and be of good use.
Hydration critical.
I have 6 kilomoles of CO2. That's actually pretty good. Generating about 3.1 kilowatts and 3.7 kilowatts, so that's 7 kilowatts of power. That's actually a good rate. One thing that I don't like about the walls that I'm building, it takes a lot.
Oxygen low.
It takes a lot of plastic sheets. Yeah, clearly I was in there a while if I didn't build that many. So I'm starting to feel the pressure for sure more and more. So I'm actually really starting to push the hygiene. I don't remember if I got red hygiene in the previous part. It might have been this part I was thinking of. That is about the time that I actually start pushing it so much I start to actually hit red hygiene more often. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this is this at least allows me to have a view. I've really wanted to be able to see the Vulcan black hole and be capable of looking out at the mountains and that kind of like volcano lava area right there. I just really wanted to have that view. I want to say that that probably is what slowed everything down, and the fact that I really wanted to have this kind of way too soon.
Waste tank caution.
But yeah, as far as stinks goes, this actually, it actually is coming along really well. That's really weird. I did that twice already, where I just was building a wall on one end and I moved it ever so slightly that I built a different wall. It's really odd you can do that. You can do that with welding frames. Day 12, no plants. Every time I see that, every time I saw that day counter, I got more and more on edge because it was just one of those. I'm behind. I took a big gamble on that right there. I didn't want. I got lazy. Didn't want to do the whole airlock thing. Like, if you click to cycle the airlock and then you vent your waste tank in there, it's highly likely that you will actually get it in there. But if I did it far too late, then I would have actually lost some of that oxygen. Which I was, I'm trying to save as much of it as possible. Because one of the things I intended to do is, one, pressurize the greenhouse, but use some of that to make some water as soon as I can. Because I'm going to be, I'm going to run out of my water bottle soon. Now, I don't really program my grow light. I do have a grow light script I put on the, what is it, the workshop. And it works pretty well for Vulcan, so I wasn't gonna, no reason to do any sort of reprogramming for that. Might as well just reuse it. But as far as the greenhouse is concerned, I mean, look, I've gotten pretty far. The building is basically done. Might as well empty it out. I wired the wrong part. I never can I can never remember which is the data port and which is not the data port for that thing. Always forget. And I do the jumping around and stuff to make sure that all my glass is done, which it is, because clearly it's a vacuum. You see how quick that was. Large power vent means business when it is vacuuming out a room. If I did an active vent, I'm pretty sure I would have still been waiting for that to vacuum out the room. So it is impressive. This expansion thing is where I've actually shot myself on the foot several times without an airlock. Because most of the times I actually pressurized the printer room so that I could actually function, you know, without my suit, so that hygiene wouldn't have been a problem. But, yeah. You can imagine the frustration that it is, oh hey, I made a room expansion and then realized, oh, the airlock door is cycled. Oh yeah, this was a mistake right there. I printed way too many grow lights. I didn't even realize I left that running. That was a frustrating find because Electrum is not hard to make, but you need it for turbo volume pumps and pipe analyzers. And I only needed 2 grow lights, and yet now I have like 7 of them, which means that I had to spend time to go get more resources. It was not a it was not a it was a mistake that I did not need to make. So now that I have a spot vacuumed out for the greenhouse, the next thing is I need to connect that pipe system to do 2 important functions. One, allow me to use an active vent to draw out CO2 from the tank to pressurize the room. And 2, use the thermal buffer of that tank to keep the room cool. This is about the point that I actually set the phase change device correctly for this. And I originally set it to, you know, a little bit under for, you know, to kind of do a little control and to still have decent movement of thermal energy. But, you know, it'll come into play later because I'm both pushing hot CO2 in there. I'm also drawing some of that CO2 out. I'm also cooling down that room once it's finally pressurized, and you know, all that stuff. So all that is needed.
Power low.
But yeah, it's actually surprising how strong a phase change system can be, or actually just passive, you know, passive systems in general. Now, one of the main reasons is I basically make a second airlock. I'm basically working on making a second airlock. Like, this is going to be another airlock so that I can make sure that my greenhouse stays pressurized. And that's what that's for. I will eventually pressurize the printer room, but let's, a little bit of work at a time. I probably could have done that and pressurized the printer room so that it had CO2, but I would have needed to put yet another vent, and I honestly didn't want to deal with moving, printer thermal energy creation, slowing the whole thing down. Especially since it would take quite a while for my potatoes to actually make enough oxygen so that the whole printer room and the greenhouse is breathable. So that comes the next part. I need to, all of the gases that I stored, I need to send them out to the greenhouse. I'm really kind of wishing that I had the whole exhaust system for sending my waste tank gases right there, as I was making my breeding spot. Because if I had done that, then I wouldn't have had to do this. I was trying to decide if I had done all contingencies, and so yep, decided yep I did. So let's do that. You can see the temperature's dropping pretty rapidly. I figured I might as well finish out this airlock, and oh, yep, red hygiene. That was one of those moments I'm like, oh crap, my hygiene is red. So yeah, basically, yeah. I didn't let my... I try not to let my mullet go.
Power low. Oxygen low.
Now I can vent my waste tank out there. It's perfect. See, this is what I'm talking about. If I had taken the time to make a early AC system, probably could have gotten it all cooled down. I mean, look, it's 50 Celsius, and now it's time to pressurize the greenhouse. So yeah, major things accomplished. So basically wrap up time for this one. Got renewable power generation, so that means I don't need to go out and mine coal. I am slowly collecting CO2 and moving that energy out. Now the only things that are left is to actually begin growing my potatoes. Get all the hydroponics I need. Get the grow lights operational. And basically grow my potatoes. Now it's, try to upscale the system. I'm checking how much power I'm using. So yeah, that's like what, 2.5 kilowatts, and I noticed that I'm generating, about 6, which is perfect. This means that I shouldn't be on a power deficit. I already pumped out quite a bit of CO2 into the greenhouse, and I still had 6.9. That actually was great. Good thing to know. So now it's actually time to get things planted. Now, for the plant math, I'll go over it again at the beginning of the next video. For the plant math, 3 potatoes are not going to at all make up the oxygen needs that I need. They're just going to barely convert any of the CO2 to oxygen, so not even at all much. And you definitely want to keep them growing. You don't want to wait until you're out of food, because you want to let the growth be a very quick exponential growth. 3 is not going to cut it. It's just that's just enough to feed you. When they get to 9, that's still nowhere near close to cutting it for breathing. It becomes better for converting CO2 to oxygen. When you get to 27, that's when you actually are able to cover your breathing. 27 is more than enough for you to actually be in the room with them, barely breathable, be in the room with them and offset your breathing in stationary difficulty. So as soon as I hit 27, I would no longer be at risk of running out of oxygen for breathing. However, I would still be at risk of running out of water completely. And that's what the final growth is. At 81 potato plants, now you're making enough oxygen for breathing, and you're making enough oxygen to turn into water for you and the plants. Last time I did the math, I am basically rounding 60 potatoes is what you need. And honestly, that's kind of what the hard part for this starts. If it was ferns, 30 plants, that would have been better. But since I'm not doing traders, I'm very heavily limited on what I can do. Alrighty, so that's where we're gonna wrap up, as I'm basically gonna let hygiene recover, because it is slowing me down right now. Next time, we're gonna actually get the potatoes planted. So thank you for your time. This is Shadow Drake. Hope to see you then. Have a good day. Goodbye.